Last minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. It's okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as
Thanks,
simple
Ryan.
as 1,
What's
2,
up?
3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast with Derek Brown on the NASM Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Mindful Drinking Podcast, where we talk about tips and information that you can use to drink more mindfully. I'm your host, Derek Brown. I'm an NASM certified wellness coach, author of Mindful Mixology, a comprehensive guide to no and low alcohol cocktails, and an award-winning bartender. And here we are in the middle of dry January. It's dry January. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of news out there. And there's especially some news that I've been very curious to share, to learn more about and to share with you as far as the Surgeon General. So I want to start with that right up front. The Surgeon General has said a lot of things recently, but the one that you may have seen, because it was everywhere, is about the warning labels on alcohol. That would be all types of alcohol, whether it's beer, wine, spirits, etc. And the warning labels are about alcohol and cancer. And this has made huge headlines. It's everywhere. I know, because I was on CNN recently. I've been on Fox News talking about it. And it's a tremendous issue. Now, whether or not they actually put these warning labels on is something entirely different. This is a recommendation. And the news itself, the information is, old news in some ways. This has already been out. The American Cancer Society, the CDC, the medical community have been talking about the relationship between alcohol and cancer for a long time. And in fact, there's 7 different types of cancer, including throat, larynx, mouth, esophageal, all different types, colorectal, breast cancer. All of these are correlated with alcohol. And especially as you drink more, the risk increases. And so that news has been out there. It continues to be shared. And the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, wanted to make sure that the public, before he leaves office, because obviously with the incoming president, there is going to be a change in the Surgeon General. Before he leaves office, this is one of the pieces of information he wanted to share, which I think is really powerful and necessary. And it's a conversation that we need to talk about. What exactly is the risk? And, how does that affect the way that we drink? And certainly as mindful drinkers, we want that information, because information is key to drinking mindfully. While that information has kind of been at the forefront, there was another thing that the Surgeon General mentioned, Dr. Murthy mentioned, that I think got a little less news. And I think it's equally, if not more important. And that was his parting prescription for America. In his parting prescription for America, he talked about his father and how his father had left his village to come to the United States, and how that change precipitated this longing for community. And in this prescription, Dr. Murthy talks about the need for us to look past the triad of success, which is power, money, fame. These are the things that are in American culture today, for better or worse, but obviously not for better in many cases. These are affecting our health. They're not just, these sort of arbitrary values. They definitely affect our outcomes in terms of our well-being, and especially in opposition to the triad of fulfillment that Dr. Murthy talks about, which is relationships, meaning, and purpose. So the reason I bring those up in relationship to mindful drinking is because those things are intimately connected. Very often drinking happens in a social environment. And sometimes we are drinking because we're trying to hide aspects of our personality or ourselves that we don't feel happy with, aspects of our lives that we haven't really dealt with. That was certainly true in my life. And so we need to be able to have meaningful relationships, to have purpose, to be able to come together as a community. And that helps us to live healthier lives. In fact, mortality is tied to that. Our overall health is tied to that. So social wellness is critical. And I have been talking about that for a while, but I just want to double down on that because I think that Dr. Murthy's prescription is so critical. We need to change the way we live. That's what he's saying. We need to change the way we live. And we need to shift it from this triad of success to a triad of fulfillment. And that is something that really struck me in this past weekend where I was at the Mindful Drinking Fest. Now, Mindful Drinking Fest, we've talked about on previous episodes, but essentially it's a 3-day celebration of no and low alcohol cocktails, mindful drinking, and social wellness. And during that time, there are wonderful drinks to try that are mostly non-alcoholic. There are parties, there are networking events, there are concerts, all kinds of things that are going on. And we just had that. And it was amazing to be able to see all of the people there, some of which who are sober, some of whom are not drinking for whatever reason. Maybe sobriety is not really the reason, like in the sense that they're there for recovery. They might be simply taking a break, or maybe it's because it's dry January. And they showed up, and as I was walking through the various events, sometimes running through because as the event director, I had a lot to do. I was often stopped and somebody would tell me their story. And almost inevitably weaved into that story about why they drank the way they did or why they changed the way they drink are aspects of relationships, meaning, and purpose. And so I think it's really important that we explore those and that we understand why those affect our health, why those affect the way that we drink alcohol. And another part of that is recognizing that within that, we absolutely have to not throw out the baby with the bathwater. So if we are changing our relationship to alcohol and we are drinking less, right? Let's say it's dry January and you've decided, okay, I'm not going to drink this month. We have to make sure that we are still connecting with other people, that we are still having those relationships, that we are still working together to find meaning and purpose as a community. Because without those, we fall deeper into a hole. And there are aspects of depression and anxiety and overall mortality that are associated with a lack of community. The news cycle is very short. We might not even remember this. You might not even remember this. But in 2023, Dr. Murthy, the Surgeon General, also described loneliness as an epidemic. And in fact, in that, he talked about loneliness. There was a key piece of data that I thought was really, really interesting. He said loneliness is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of our well-being, in terms of our mortality. Well, that's crazy because obviously tobacco is a killer. And it really got me thinking, well, what is it like in terms of alcohol? And there was a study, one study I found, and it's not really conclusive. It's kind of just delving into the subject. So take it with a grain of salt. But they were talking about 5 drinks being the equivalent of 5 cigarettes. So, in a way, what we're seeing is that loneliness is even more dangerous in some ways than binge drinking. And both of them are dangerous. So don't choose one or the other. By the way, I would not trade one for the other. What I'm suggesting is that both of those are interrelated and we have to care for both of them. We have to look at this epidemic of loneliness and recognize that if we're going to reduce or stop drinking, that we have to keep our relationships up and stay social. Mindful Drinking Fest was one way to do that. It's over. You can't buy tickets now, so don't worry about that. But there are ways that you can organize within your community. There are places that you can go to have and enjoy a non-alcoholic drink, whether that's a coffee shop or even bars nowadays. And let's talk about that. You are listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast. My name is Derek Brown, and we are talking about the surge in general, and we are talking about loneliness and alcohol and sort of the dangers that both present. But we're also talking about how we can get past that, because it is a little intimidating if you're going to reduce your alcohol intake or you're going to eliminate drinking alcohol. And let's say it's dry January, or let's say that you've decided you've done that for dry January and you decide, I'm going to do that for the rest of the year, or for an additional month or an additional 3 months. It doesn't really matter. How am I going to be able to stay social and connect with people? And so one way to do that is to find bars that have non-alcoholic products. And fortunately, it's expanding. There are many more bars that have, and restaurants that have these products. And recently in VinePair, they listed the top 10 non-alcoholic programs in the United States, which involved some of the best restaurants and bars in the United States, including Dogon in Washington, D.C., which is the cocktail program that I'm responsible for creating, where 50% of it is with alcohol or low alcohol, and the other half is non-alcoholic. So you can sit down at the bar and you can order a drink, and it's just as thoughtfully prepared. It's just as delicious. It's just as complex as the other drink, but the only difference is it doesn't have alcohol in it. So that's one example. You can look up VinePair's top 10 non-alcoholic programs. It was written by John DeBerry, a friend of mine, a fantastic writer, and somebody who's done a lot of great programs himself, cocktail programs. So that's worth looking into. But even, at your local bars and restaurants, this January, in 2 weeks, sorry, I'm going to speak before the Bowling Proprietors of America, which is pretty wild, right? Because often I associate bowling with drinking beer. I'm sure you do too. I'm sure as soon as I said bowling, you imagine the bowling shirts, the shoes, a stein, whatever it is. But even they are starting to question, like, how do we incorporate non-alcoholic products into what we're doing? So some of the highest restaurants, some of just fun places that are, maybe not really associated with craft cocktails, but have delicious non-alcoholic beers. It's happening. And in between all kinds of places. In Washington, D.C., we have Binge Bar, which is an entirely non-alcoholic bar. But you can see those also throughout the United States. There are lots of them. And one of the resources that I use for that is zeroproofnation.com, where they have a list of every non-alcoholic bar in the United States. So if you're deciding, hey, look, I want to go to a bar, but I don't want to be, maybe it's a trigger for you. Maybe you're just used to it. And so your hand immediately reaches for that beer or cocktail, and you kind of, lose your willpower at that moment. I understand that. There's plenty of times that I've lost my willpower. And then you have this bar that's so beautiful. It has all of the trappings of a regular bar, but everything in it is non-alcoholic. So that's a place that you can go and you can feel that sense of community and connection with zero alcohol, which I think is awesome. So what I'm saying is go out spend time together, connect with each other, and use these other products, or, maybe choose venues or locations where alcohol is not a part of it, including tea shops, coffee shops, things like that, that can help us connect, because those connections are just as important to our health. Volunteering is another great way to do that. Actually, volunteerism is down in the United States, which is very sad, because it's a time where we need help. I'm sure that many of you have been paying attention to what's happening in Los Angeles. I have family out there and they are safe, but there is a lot going on. And it's necessary that we support the people out there. And there's many ways to do that, whether it's donating money. But one of the best ways to support that and to support each other is through volunteer activities. And you can do that, obviously, if you're in the area, or in other volunteer activities, supporting your own community, your own local community. There's plenty of need for it, and volunteerism is down. And there really is empirical evidence to suggest that volunteering will actually improve your overall health. So Dr. Murthy's parting prescription is an important one for us. It's important for many reasons, but it's, and I love that he puts it in an imperative that we need to change our lives, right? Because you might say, okay, that's nice. Yeah, okay, fine. I'm gonna do that at some point. I'm gonna sign up for volunteer at some point. I'm going to try to connect with that old friend at some point. I'm going to try to, go out to a non-alcoholic bar and meet people at some point. But that point is now. This is the opportunity right before you. Our lives are so busy, and we're worried about that triad of success, money, power, fame. Maybe it's just money. Like maybe it's not that maybe you're not looking to be famous. Maybe you just want to look to make enough money to support your lifestyle, which is totally understandable, in this economy. But along the way, you can't ignore that you have these social needs, that you have to connect with other people, that even though people can sometimes be difficult and challenging and put us in a place where we're not, we're not always happy with the outcome, but we need to engage in those relationships, and we need to do it on a regular basis. And we need to change our lives around that so that our lives are connected with each other. We recognize that and we see that necessity. And so I concur with the Surgeon General, not as a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I'm a health coach, which is, I think, a really great position, but certainly I'm not prescribing anything to anyone. But I concur with the doctor, and I am encouraging you right now to start to adopt activities that are helping you connect with other people. Call that friend that you haven't called for a while. Show up at a non-alcoholic bar, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is greatly going to improve your lives. And I'm thankful for the Surgeon General for all of his information over the years, whether it's the information about loneliness that we got, whether it is the alcohol and cancer information, which is something we definitely need to learn as well. And definitely the idea that community matters, not just as some abstract idea, but directly affecting our health. So thank you to the Surgeon General. And please, you can check out more at Health and Human Services. I think it's hhs.gov. And we look forward to the incoming Surgeon General, and hopefully they have as great information. But in the meantime, thank you, Dr. Vivek Murthy. And thank you all for listening to the Mindful Drinking podcast. And as always, we would love to hear from you. We would love to hear your views, information that you're looking for. We always try to reach out and answer your questions. So please write in, please like, and please tell us what you like about the show. Otherwise, as always, here's to Mindful Drinking.